What's up? Obviously, we're talking about the worst books I read this year. I have 9 books to talk about. I will say that the first 3 are actually DNFs, but I did reach the 70% mark on all of them before DNFing them, so I feel like it's fair enough to talk about them. Obviously, if I didn't finish, it's a bad book. But if that bugs you, then just know the rest of the books on this list were also disappointing. Not all of these books are like the worst book I've ever read. Some of them were just disappointing, but I'll let you know which ones those are. Oh, wait. Welcome to day 4 of Grinchmas? What's up? Almost forgot. But anyways, like I said in the start of my best books of 2022, which I'll link above if you wanted to watch that, I will be leaving these books linked down below in case my description either intrigues you or isn't good enough for you to understand what the book is about. So just find that, if you want to, at your own peril. 9 books on this list. I just kind of want to jump in because, first of all, I'm losing light. Second of all, it's not like this is that exciting. Sorry if any of my opinions are mean. I kind of say sorry about that because, you'll see what I mean. You'll see. So let's just get started. Let's start with, actually, all of these are in one way or another TikTok favorites, at least like the first few. Book number 1, Den of Vipers by K.A. Knight. I got to the 87% mark before I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna finish this. Maybe one day I will, but I don't know. Basically, we have our main character, Roxy, and she is a badass. She owns her own bar and she will beat up anyone who tries to take her power. And they live in a city where everyone is kind of beating everyone up and that it's ruled by mobsters. So she is really badass. She can beat anyone up. And lucky for her though, she's badass because she had a terrible father. She had a terrible childhood and she finally got away from her dad. She owns this bar now. She's getting her stuff done, even if maybe it's not the best situation for her, but it's still better than what she had. And her piece of shit dad, he still comes in to ruin her life because when he owes money to the Vipers, which is the meanest gang in the whole city, he says, "You can have my daughter." Sorry. Because he is so sad about it, but he's still you can have her to pay off my debts. I feel really bad about it though, but you can have her. So these 4 dudes are yeah, okay, we'll take your daughter. We're gonna do whatever we want with her. Right. They pop up to her bar and they steal her away, but not after she beat up a ton of their men and they're really intrigued by her. She has finally caught the interest of this gang of guys that never likes any of the girls that they ever talk to. And they take her away to live with them in their fancy penthouse and do sexy things with her, I guess. It's a reverse harem, so yeah. I will say the premise of this book, I said it very sarcastically, but whatever, it sounds interesting. What really got to me though is just the writing is so bad and there is no plot besides Roxy being super hot to these guys that have never thought anyone else was hot. It's giving a lot of not like other girls vibes, and then the actual smut is just shocking. There was a point, I'm not going to explain more than what I will say right now, but a guy was willingly stabbing himself to get with her. That was shocking. I'm not saying that this was bad because of the premise, the smut aspect of it, whatever. If you're looking for a smutty smut, go for it. I'm not going to judge you for that. I'm going to judge the fact that this writing was atrocious. And she bugged me so much. Roxy was so annoying. And I don't know. It was fine. But I hated it, obviously. I don't know. Not because of, again, no kink shaming here. Whatever. Do your thing. Like what you like. That part was kind of okay. But it was just so abrupt. I like slow burn, I think. I think that's where I'm gonna leave that. Number 2, though, was another TikTok recommendation. And now, after this year, I've learned to take everything TikTok, book talk, smut talk says with a grain of salt, with a whole actual shaker of salt, because I don't trust them. Number 2, this one had such good vibes from TikTok. Everyone was I love it so much. This is so romantic. Let me say what the book is first. Forget Me Not by Carissa Kinward. Now this one, I actually didn't end up liking it because I went into it expecting something completely different. Basically, the only thing that I'd seen was a quote, which, by the way, let me tell you where I got with this. I was at 70% exactly when I DNF'd this, but there was a quote on TikTok, which is how TikTok always recommends things to me. It was just oh, I don't know, it was something about a mate being like told by the boyfriend, like, how do you feel that I am with the girl that you're mated to? Something like that. But I thought in my stupidity that this was gonna be like a fantasy story about mates that were lost in time to each other, whatever. It was not that. It's actually a sci-fi, and I think that that was like the first drop of cold water on my head. And it's about Eliza, who is with another guy, and she just wants to have fun. She's like an adventure girly. She doesn't want to like live in her home planet, and they're coming back from a 3-year-long vacation, and she loved her vacation. She doesn't want to go back home, and her boyfriend kind of doesn't get her, but like they also like get each other. Like not really get each other, but like they still love each other, you know? They've been on this adventure together. And she always, though, has had this dream. Like whenever she goes to sleep at night, she sees another man, and his name is Silas, and he is like her other half. And every night when like they dream of each other, they're also like naked and they're sleeping together and all that. And she was like, it's just a dream, whatever. And then she meets this guy, and he's real, and he's on the ship that her and her boyfriend are on the way back to their home city, and he's like an adventurer dude, and I don't know. Obviously, her boyfriend ends up being a piece of trash, and obviously Silas is like loving and whatever. I just couldn't buy into it. I was really annoyed most of the time. I thought like their relationship was really annoying. I think the premise could have been cool, but instead I was really underwhelmed. I think that if there was like slightly more plot than the fact that she wants adventure and he is adventure, and they just dream of each other every night, and now they're together forever, like I think I might have finished it, but it felt like that was the journey that they were going on. I was underwhelmed. The writing was underwhelming. The scene that I had read on TikTok when it came, I was like, that's not even good. Like that is such an out of context scene. It sounds like it's gonna be something steamy, and it wasn't. I also didn't vibe with the smut scenes in this. It was just kind of neutral for me, not my speed, I guess. I also don't like the whole like caveman thing, to be totally fair. I'm not like into a lot of like facial hair and super long hair and like literal caveman etiquette also, and that was very much what Silas was and what she was into, which if you're into it, cool, I get it. I get it for you. Obviously, I don't get it, I guess. It wasn't for me. I can see maybe people enjoying this. The writing was definitely better than Den of Vipers, but it wasn't for me. Next, another TikTok recommendation. This one, also not what I expected at all, and it was The Ritual by Chantal Tessier. Either way, I got to 75% before giving up on that one. I don't know what I expected this to be, but I did not expect it to be what I'm going to describe a little bit to you. Again, no spoilers. This one specifically, the writing in it was bad. This is probably the worst writing, actually, of the three. It felt like someone had written this on like Wattpad and then copy and pasted it into their book, which, okay, no shame there. No shame in the game, but I don't even remember her name. I know his name because his name's Riot. Doesn't that sound like a Wattpad name? Riot? Blake. Oh, her name's Blake. Of course. Blake is such strong, not like other girls, throughout this entire thing. Basically, I don't know what I expected this to be. I really don't, because again, it was probably one of those like clips that I saw on TikTok and I was like, oh wow, I'd love to check it out. No, Riot is part of a secret society, and this secret society of like rich people are going to one day hold all the power in the world, basically. Like their family already does. They were like initiated into this society because of their high standingness already, but it's also a society that like instead of just being like a secret society at school, everyone kind of knows about it, but they don't actually know what the society does. And the society, low-key, are murderers. I don't feel like I'm spoiling anything by saying that, because you find that out like in the first couple of chapters. I guess that's how they keep them like honest to each other, is like, oh, well, if we murder together, then we all have secrets against each other. I'm not sure. Either way, Blake originally has a different boyfriend that's in the society, but like not as high standing as Riot, because Riot's like gonna be, I don't know, something like a supreme justice. I don't know. But when you make it through the first 3 years in this society, which is all guys, of course, they let you on your 4th year pick a girl. And this girl basically like agrees to just be whatever you want her to be. And of course, this is a smut, so it means it like that. Like she is whatever he wants it to be. And Blake, she has like a tiff with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend sucks. And Riot is like, I'm gonna take her as mine. And he does, and she's like, I'm a maiden. That doesn't matter. I hated this. I can't even justify any of it. Their love story was oh, what? You know, like, they fall in love so fast. There's no reason that she should love this guy. I hated it. I hated the secret society. I hated that it was all basically like murderers and like rude, crude things. I just feel like when you're gonna have a bad boy be the love interest, they have to have some redeeming qualities in the way that they treat the person that they supposedly are totally in love with, like they've never loved anyone before. He didn't have that. Like, there was never really a redeeming moment that I read, at least up to the 75% mark. Like, the most grievous insult was just the actual writing, because let me read this for you. So this is the first time, like, really, that he ever sees Blake. This is chapter 6. I'm just gonna read you the first paragraph. I watched the brunette stomp her way down the hall, getting as far away from me as possible. Blakely is exactly what I expected her to be. Long, dark hair and big baby blue eyes hidden behind her black-rimmed glasses. She looks so innocent with a Barbie doll face and sun-kissed skin. Great fucking body. Big tits, considering how small she is everywhere else, with a bubble ass. Can't be taller than 5'4" without hooker heels on. I'm just gonna leave it there. The not like other girls part was actually like the most grievous insult too, besides the writing. So, yeah. Anyways, those were the 3 books that I DNF'd and that were actually the worst books that I read this year. Now, for like the ones that underwhelmed me that I had high hopes for, we start with War of Two Queens by Jennifer L. I was gonna say J-Law, but like Jennifer L. Armentrout. I don't actually have a physical copy of this. I haven't had a physical copy of most of these books, but War of Two Queens, I still ended up enjoying it for the most part because it moved forward the story. This is the 4th book in the From Blood and Ash series, but this story I felt so underwhelmed by. It was just dissatisfying. The plot twists that happened were not very good. I thought that like this build up to a scene that's gonna happen with Kieran and her and Cass, you know, it was bad. There was so much that was being hyped up for this book that didn't deliver. And that is just like the most disappointing part. From Blood and Ash, if you didn't know anything about it, Poppy is like the maiden, and she is in the society where being the maiden is like one of the best things that you can be if you're not like royalty, and she is the maiden. She's going to be the maiden. She has to live her life behind a veil, and she has these horrendous scars from these creatures, these Craven that gave it to her, and that's why she's the maiden, because she survived a Craven attack when most people don't. Like, when a Craven attacks them, they will die no matter what because of like whatever poison is in their claws. And she is just like living her little tiny life, basically imprisoned, but in a beautiful cage. And then this guy pops up, and his name's Hawk, and he's like, I'm gonna be your new guard, and he's hot. And she's like, ooh, are we, you know? And eventually he kidnaps her away from her life because everything that she knows is probably, maybe, potentially a lie. Who knows? You won't know, at least not for a while, if it's all true or not. And this book, we got more explanations, but it was so slow moving. I don't know. It felt underwhelming. It was dissatisfying, and it felt so in between. I wanted this to be more than it was. I expected this to be amazing. I think honestly, if I'd gone in with much lower expectations, I would have enjoyed it. Here we are. Next we have Home Before Dark, which I actually do have a copy of. This was another one that was just underwhelming. I wanted this to be what Haunting of Hill House didn't give to me. I obviously watched the show before I read Haunting of Hill House, and the show, in my opinion, was vastly better than Haunting of Hill House, but that's not what this is about. I thought Home Before Dark would be what I wanted out of Haunting of Hill House, because we're following a girl, Maggie, who lived in a haunted house basically when she was a child, and her father wrote a whole story about this haunted house that they had to escape from in the middle of the night. But she doesn't remember any of this, and she honestly thinks that it was all kind of a lie made up by her father so that he could get money and not have lost it on this like fixer-upper that they bought. And when he dies, he leaves the house to her, and she decides that this is her moment. She's gonna go back to the house and find out if everything really did happen, if it's actually haunted, or if it was all a lie. And when she gets there, a lot of things are starting to match up with the descriptions that she had from the book. And you kind of watch her on this journey to figure out why she doesn't remember any of it, try and remember it, and see if it's actually haunted, and it's like creepy. Now, the reason that this one is going on this list is because it wasn't creepy. I think that most of it I wasn't very scared for. I could tell that there was suspense being attempted, but I wasn't feeling suspenseful. My lighting's getting too dark. Give me a minute. This is what happens when you film when the sun's going down. But it wasn't very suspenseful. The revelations, although they were twisty, like I didn't really see it coming in the way that it did eventually come. I just felt like dissatisfied by it. I felt dissatisfied by her journey journey of like trying to uncover the mystery. I hated what it ended up being, and I wasn't spooked. And that was my whole thing. I wanted to be like spooked. I wanted it to be a spooky story, and it wasn't delivering a spooky story. So next on this list is Nightfall by Penelope Douglas. Yeah, Penelope Douglas. I gave this 3 stars. The problem with this one is I was anticipating this matchup for the longest time. I was waiting patiently for Will and Emery to finally have their story time together, because this is the 4th book in the Devil's Night series, and basically each of the books follows a different one of the group of 4 guys and like their love interest. And Emery is the only person that we had heard about beforehand and like from like the first book as being Will's something. Everyone else, it was kind of a surprise whenever we would get introduced to them in one way or another. But Emery, we had background to know that she was going to be the person. And I loved the beginning of this. It was so interesting. I loved the way it started. It was a mystery from the get. I will say I think that Penelope Douglas does a really good job of writing like a bully romance situation. Now, where this lost me was actually after the beginning, because I thought that that was like where the setting was going to take place. But there is a change of setting halfway through the book, and we also get like all of the other characters coming in. I loved finding out what had gone wrong all those years before, since in the Devil's Night series, it basically, in the first book at least, there's a group of guys and they are like the leaders of their school. Like they're 4 guys, they're super popular, they play basketball, and every single year, Devil's Night, the night before Halloween, they will go wild. They're very rich as well, I should point that out. They have like no consequences for most of what they do, so they're able to like pull like insane pranks on their whole town that are honestly a lot of it illegal, but they get away with it because there's no proof and like they're dudes being dudes. But in the start of the series, it's been like a few years since all of them graduated, and only one of them has made a career. He is a professional basketball player, and the other 3 all went to jail for something that happened at a Devil's Night 3 years before. And you watch it unfold from there. And like I said, Will and Emery, they were a thing in high school. And this is like the story takes place years after high school. At this point, it's like 6 or 7 years. So you want to know what happened all those years ago for their relationship to end so suddenly and for him to like hate her with all of his might. And though I understand, actually I get it. It was kind of a miscommunication situation, which was kind of annoying, but that wasn't really the issue. It was literally for me the fact that after the halfway point of this book, I was bored. Like the setting was boring. I didn't like them being like very adulty. I didn't like that they kept getting into tiffs just to get into tiffs, because I was like, you resolved your issues. Why are you not acting like you resolved your issues? And I also didn't like, and this is a personal preference at this point, but most of them were like parents, and like that was kind of like what their goals were, and that doesn't mix with me. So obviously for that to be like a main plot point of the very end kind of situation, I just wasn't into it. But yeah, it's still good. I mean, it's still worth the read, but I wish it could have ended at that first half of the book, and that the rest of the book, the other half of the book, could have been its own thing, because it did drag, because it was like so much longer, it felt. 7. Okay, this one, again, more of a dissatisfied situation, and more because I think it just wasn't for me. But that's the Bromance Book Club by Lyssa K. Adams. This was just another one that I had really high hopes for when I went into it, so I felt underwhelmed by the story. Basically, we are following a guy who royally messed up his marriage. He's a professional athlete, and he just like hasn't been there, and he hasn't like paid attention to his wife as she like takes care of their daughters. And he's like trying to fix everything because it's about to end, and his wife doesn't really want to fix it. But his buddies are like, you know what you gotta do? You gotta join our Bromance Book Club, where we read romance books to learn what girls actually want. And that's how you're gonna save your marriage. So he has to like get over his masculine like annoyingness to read a romance book, because he's like, that's not manly, I can't do it. But then he reads it and he's like, wow, that's so romantic that the Duke did that. And I think that's my issue, is that the romance book that was being read is not a romance book that I would personally want. Like, if I was in her situation, I wouldn't want my husband to read that and be like, I'm gonna do this with her, you know? Also, this guy literally just didn't have basic decency skills. I'm like, you learned that? That is something that you discovered by reading? Like, you couldn't just guess that off the top of your head? That's wild. I can't believe that. But also just the fact that, like, I don't like Regency romances in that way. And the twist that happens was one that I saw coming from a mile away. Like, I was like, from the start, when he did this thing, I was like, dude, you can't just do that. Like, that's not right. You're gonna get caught. And he did. So it just was underwhelming. I thought that he was stupid. I respected that he wanted to save his wedding, his marriage, but I was like, God, I'm surprised she stuck with you for this long. You're just, you don't think. Like, be a human. Have human decency. We have A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This one, nothing grievous was done. I think the issue is that when it started, I had high hopes again. I thought that it was going really well, and then it just dragged. It dragged and dragged and dragged. It was so long. It felt like there was 3 separate endings within this one book, and I was desperate for it to end. Basically, we have our girly who is a witch. Our girly, what's her name? Diana. Diana, who's a witch. She doesn't associate with her witch side. She doesn't practice. She's not like a witch. She just wants to study and study without her witchy magic and just like focus on her degree, on her mastering. No, she's not working on her degree. She's already done with it. She's just like a professor at this point and just like keeps doing research because that's her thing. And she has a focus on alchemy. And one day when she's calling books to try and figure out like more for this presentation that she's gonna have, she accidentally calls a book that gets every magical person to look at her, because this is a book that's been lost in the Cambridge Library for forever, for 100 years, and she called it and she put it back. Like, this is a book that has like secrets of their kind that can like solve things that they've all been asking, and she returned it and now she can't find it again. And everyone's like on her scent, on her tail, trying to figure out like, get us this book basically. How did you call it when no one else has been able to, when you're not even really a practicing witch? And there's like this really old, like 1,000-year-old vampire that is there to help her, but also wants access to that book, but like maybe there's a love story that's gonna happen. You know, they have to team together against everything. And I will say the theory behind this book was really interesting. Like, I liked seeing like the demons and what they entailed and the witches and the vampires. It was all fascinating. I think that there was a few good twists throughout it, but it was just so long. It was so drawn out. And I will say that it suffered from one of the things that I really don't like in stories, which is like, I hate when, I can't even describe it. I can't describe it without spoiling something. So I'm not gonna try any more than I already have. Number 9, let's talk about the last one, which I actually do own, but I left it downstairs. So it's Inward by Young Pueblo. This is one of my more recent reads. Unfortunately, this one, it fell flat for me only because I had really high hopes. I found this in the bookstore in a book shopping vlog actually, but I like read through the poems, a few of them, and I'm like, oh, this seems so good. This seems like I'm gonna really enjoy it. I've been on a mission to find like modern poetry that I actually really enjoy, and it's been hard for me, weirdly enough, but this one fell flat because at the end of the day, it was more of a self-help book than what I was looking for. It was very much a self-help book in poetry format. It was repetitive. A lot of the poems that I did enjoy would then just appear again in like different words and different ways over and over again. It was a little bit cheesy at times. It was optimistic, maybe overly optimistic, but I don't know if that's just me coming from me from like an overly realistic person. And it didn't feel like I got anything out of it, because even the things that I did enjoy, because it was well written, don't get me wrong, it was well written, but the things that I did enjoy of it were things that weren't new to me. They were like revelations that I've already had on my own. So reading it didn't cause like a, oh my gosh, I feel so seen moment. It was more of like a, same. So it just didn't work for me, but this is actually one of the ones that I would say would definitely work very well for other people. I'm just not like a spiritual, self-help, optimistic type of gal, but those are good things. They are good things, don't get me wrong. They're fantastic things to write about and read about and want to read about, so I don't judge anyone for liking this. It just literally didn't vibe with me, as I said. But that's it. Those are the 9 books that I found disappointing or that I found just straight up bad this year. I would love to know, first of all, what book did you despise this year? I think it would be fun to find that out. And also, do you have any similar opinions to the books that I talked about? Or is it the opposite? Did you absolutely adore the books that I talked about and now you hate me? That's okay. I understand. But that's it for this video today, and I will see you tomorrow for day 5 of Grinchmas. Goodbye.